Welcome to our In Focus topic tonight of Utah's concealed weapons bill. A controversial bill is making its way through the Utah legislature, which would eliminate the requirement for concealed weapons permits. ABC4's Jordan Burrows headed to the gun range to get some thoughts from gun owners.
The good thing about going through your classes and so forth is they go over the laws.
Dad and son Howard and Dennis Westwood are all for constitutional carry, even without a permit, but they think the education is vital.
You cannot use deadly force unless you can prove that your life is in danger.
House Bill 60, introduced by St. George Representative Walt Brooks, would remove the state's requirement for law-abiding Utahns over the age of 21 to have a permit to lawfully carry a concealed firearm.
I think education's the best thing, and that is the reason I do like the concealed permit class and it being required.
Utah law currently allows people who are legally able to possess a firearm to openly carry their guns in public. A permit is only required for carrying a concealed firearm. The Westwoods think education early on would help with gun safety.
Why don't we start teaching gun safety and gun laws at high school?
There is nothing listed in House Bill 60 about education and training with guns. The Westwoods say regardless of what the decision is, they'll accept whatever happens with the bill moving forward.
A big Second Amendment person. An armed society is a polite society.
Mixed feelings. I'm okay with it. I know you can legally open carry here. I would never do it. It just causes commotion.
That was ABC4's Jordan Burrows reporting. HB 60 had its first reading on the Senate floor and will be read in committee tomorrow. Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on Utah's concealed weapons bill. For the most part, Utah has historically been pro-Second Amendment, and our laws reflect that. But even within those laws, there can be nuances. During the House vote on HB 60, Republican Representative and Second Amendment supporter Merrill Nelson voted against the bill, saying that laws need restraints and making an analogy that religious freedom does not allow for human sacrifices. So does this bill go too far? Joining us now is Aaron Turner, the owner of Utah CCW Carry, a company that provides training for concealed weapons permits. Aaron, thank you so much for making time to be here tonight, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Aaron, you are an instructor for concealed carry classes. Could you help us understand what does your role entail?
You know, the state of Utah, the Department of Public Safety outlines for us what we're supposed to teach, but they also give us the latitude to, discuss mental readiness. I'm a firm believer that carrying a firearm, the physical aspect of carrying a firearm, is just the beginning. Having mental readiness, understanding the laws, understanding the boundaries of the laws, and most importantly, de-escalating and avoiding conflict.
And going off of that, you've told us that a lot of your training is mental scenario planning. What exactly does that mean, and why do you feel that's the most important part of the training?
Well, you know, we can put laws out there on paper, but a common folk doesn't always understand how to articulate that into a real world. So we spend a lot of time going over real world scenarios, using real examples that have happened in the state and around the country, and then how to respond appropriately to them.
Now, when it comes to the bill to eliminate the requirement for a certification for concealed carry, what are your thoughts?
Well, after reading it in detail, I don't think it's a substitution for a permit. The concealed permit certainly allows you to do some things that I don't think this bill will allow you to do. For example, as you mentioned, carrying a firearm onto a K through 12 public school or a higher education public school. Reciprocity with other states. This bill simply just allows somebody to throw a jacket over their firearm as they run to, say the grocery store at 2 in the morning for some reason.
So on the other side, do you see any benefits for getting rid of this requirement?
Well, I think it is important, as I just mentioned, somebody who is not comfortable open carrying. Open carrying tends to bring a lot of scrutiny from citizens and oftentimes law enforcement. So this would allow you to then not be as obvious. And I think being concealed carry carries a lot of weight into being having good self-protection, because not everybody sees that you're carrying. And it certainly one thing that's important is that when you put a gun on, the ego has to be turned off. And so I think that's something that this bill really does need to address, is that, from the mental readiness standpoint.
With that being said, and with your expertise in this topic, do you know if you support, oppose, or are you kind of in the middle as far as where this bill stands?
I think constitutional carry, as it's called, is very important, and I'm going to stand for it. I certainly would like to see something, whether it's through a bill or through public service announcements, that everybody go out and get some training. Again, going to the range and putting lead down the range through a target is just the tip of the iceberg. It really is a mental game. You need to have understanding of your situational awareness and how to avoid the conflict to begin with.
As a business owner, are you concerned at all that you might have a possible loss of income if this bill does pass and removes that requirement?
I really don't think so. I'm actually booking about 2 months out with quite a few classes. We've had to limit it to 9 or 10 people just because of COVID. But I really do think that, something we've already offered, it's just law review classes for my students. And we really go the extra mile by staying in touch with our former students, sending out email blasts, letting them know how some of the laws are changed, what's up on the Hill, and everything that's going on. I think that's important for Utah Instructor to just not do the class and be done with the student. It's our responsibility to keep in touch with them.
Aaron, we have about 30 seconds left. What's your message to lawmakers and members of the public who are following this bill?
Wow. I think Representative Brooks has done a really good job about reaching out to everybody. I think that he's really trying to do this the right way, and there's middle ground in everything. What the final answer is, I don't know, but certainly if there's, something that looks like an enhanced permit or something to that effect that, really affords people the opportunity to come and get the education.
All right, you've been hearing from Aaron Turner, owner of Utah CCW Carry. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight and sharing your perspective with us. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on Utah's concealed weapons bill. Joining us now live in studio is Representative Walt Brooks from St. George. Representative, we know you're busy. Thanks for carving out time to be here tonight.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Let's start at the beginning. For those who may be just learning about this bill now, what prompted you to sponsor this legislation, and what does the bill aim to accomplish?
Sure. Well, it was brought to me several years ago by some constituents, and I didn't get on board right away. I wanted to see what was the permit doing, what was the purpose of having the permit process, and it's basically to make us safer, to provide more training, or to require people to get training. But looking around the states that already have this permitless carry, is what I like to refer to it as, there was no increase in violence when they got rid of the permits. So we studied them and looked at all the states for the last 20 years, and it was the same thing. Not just a few didn't have any increase, none of them did. There's 19 of them that didn't have increase. And so not only do we have the studies that shown it, but we can actually look at other states that have permitless carry and saw the same type of behavior. And I came to realize that good law-abiding citizens, what this is aimed for, they follow the law and they're accountable for their actions. So and people forget, it doesn't matter if you have a permit or not. If you pull out a weapon and threaten anybody or discharge it, you are accountable for those actions. And people who are law-abiding, they go get the training they need to, so they're prepared properly.
How would you describe the nature of this bill? Would you say that this is a practical bill that helps streamline or benefit the citizens of Utah, or is it about fortifying the Second Amendment?
I think it's just more making it reasonable. See, I think the permit's great, and we're not getting rid of the permit. It has a lot of use. It has reciprocity through a lot of different states. Like you mentioned before, you have to have a permit to go onto college campuses to conceal carry. But what it does do is, if you're open carrying, it does cause a lot of problems with people that are nervous around guns. I think we should be respectful of that. And when you conceal it, it reduces that, lowers the temperature there. But I also think that the fact that you can open carry, the fact that you can carry a loaded weapon in your vehicle and on your home, but if I'm out now and I put my jacket over my weapon, I'm breaking the law. It just doesn't seem reasonable to be able to have that type of consequence, especially when we have evidence that concealed carrying by regular citizens does not increase violence. In fact, most states show a decrease in violent crimes.
Going off of that, some concerns that we've heard is that CCW classes provide education and training about gun safety, use, and storage. So if the permit is no longer required, gun owners could potentially miss out on this type of knowledge and awareness. What's your response to these concerns?
That's a very valid concern. We want people to get trained. In fact, looking at some states that actually tracked who goes to classes, it is evident that in every state that the permits have gone down, but not class attendance. They've actually gone up, because now people feel like they don't have to go through this process to conceal carry, but they still want to be prepared and be responsible, so they go get the training that they need. In fact, we had an amendment on the floor. We try to work with everybody. I worked with the other side of the aisle. I worked with some of our own colleagues that had concerns. Representative Elison, he is big on what about suicide prevention and different things. So we're utilizing some funds that are in that permit account to be able to encourage people to get the training, to get about show how easy it is to learn, not necessarily about the concealed part, but really where most gun violence happens is in their own homes. They're not securing the gun properly. So it encouraged them how and why they need to secure that gun. And there's other legislation probably going to come out later this session to expand it. We want training to be ubiquitous through the state so everyone has an opportunity to have easy access to training.
Now we know this bill is controversial, so what kind of obstacles are you facing with this bill, if any?
Well, there's always people that don't like guns. They're big and scary, and I can relate to that. This may sound silly, but there's a ride up a lagoon called the Wild Mouse, and I hate it. Every time I go in, I think I'm going to die. And because I'm a pretty hefty guy, and I'm not sure all those brackets are going to keep me on the rails. But I keep going, and I keep going, and every time I think I'm going to die. But the evidence has showed me that it's not going to happen. I survive every time. But it's still, I don't want to do it. But my kids convinced me to go. So I think everyone has that, whether it's fear of flying or fear of guns or fear of heights. You can't reason with some people. I can tell you all day all the great things about it, but there are just some things that just don't convince people who don't like a subject, and guns happens to be one of those.
Now the riot and near insurrection at the U.S. Capitol is weighing on all of our minds, especially because it just happened this month.
Sure.
Does that event play into this bill at all?
No, because we've been working on this bill for quite some time, but it is relative. We want to see what's happening with the pandemic. Is it going to cause any other issues? And those people that were breaking in, they were breaking the law. They're no longer law-abiding citizens. And people forget, when you're breaking the law, you don't have a right to carry a gun. When you're drinking alcohol, you can't carry a gun, even if you have a permit. If you're with domestic violence, you can't carry a gun. So there's a lot of rules and laws already in place to make sure that the people that are using weapons incorrectly, that they can be punished for those. And you can see that if laws worked that way, no one would ever commit a crime. So I think it's important that everyone should be able to defend themselves.
Bottom line, does this bill make Utah safer?
I think it really does. And it's not just because I think it does. I'm using data and studies that shown that other states that have done this have seen zero increase in violence. In fact, a decrease in a lot of violent crimes. And I can't see much better than we don't have to really guess anymore, because we can see exactly what's happening elsewhere.
Final words, what's your message to Utahns and those who are watching tonight?
I would say that if you want to conceal carry, make sure you do go get trained. You are accountable for your actions, no matter if you have a permit or not. I would look out to your concealed weapon permit instructors. They offer great information. You can find a lot of stuff online, so please go get yourself prepared.
All right, you've been hearing from Representative Walt Brooks from St. George, the sponsor of HB 60. Representative, thank you for making time tonight to share your perspective with us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on Utah's concealed weapons bill. Joining us now live in studio is Representative Brian King from Salt Lake City. Representative King, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here with us.
Thank you.
You were one of the lawmakers who voted against this bill. Tell us why.
Well, you know, I think that your lead into this was a good indication of why I voted against it. I think the more guns you have floating around in our society, the more likely it is that you're going to have all sorts of negative things happen with those guns, whether it's accidental discharge, whether it's greater access to guns that can be used for suicide or domestic violence. The reality is that the great majority of harm that's caused by guns and deaths that are caused by guns come from suicide. And it's about 86% of the deaths that come from firearms are suicides. And then of the remaining 14%, about half of those arise out of domestic violence situations. So I just wonder, I don't think it's a good idea to make guns even more available, especially when we don't have the good training for their use.
We ended the last interview with Representative Brooks with the question, does this bill make Utah safer? What's your take on how he answered the question, and would you like to respond to it?
Well, Walt's been great to work with on this bill. He came to me many months ago and he said, listen, I want to be real open-handed with you. I want to tell you what I'm thinking about doing. He's good to work with. We just happen to disagree about this, about whether in fact having more guns in our society is going to make us safer. I don't necessarily think that it's going to cause people to have criminal acts increase, but I do think it's going to increase the likelihood, again, that the things that kill people the most from guns, suicide and domestic violence, are going to kill more people than they already do, or at least harm them. So I really think that if we're going to increase the usage of guns and increase their presence in our society, we need to at the same time do a couple of other things. Increase our training for guns, and also increase the degree to which we have background checks to ensure that when guns are sold, that people who are on the restricted list can't own or purchase or possess guns, in fact, aren't getting a hold of them.
Now, Utah's open carry laws seem to be less restrictive than concealed carry laws. Why is this, and do you think that they should be more in sync with one another?
Yeah, it's an odd thing, isn't it? You would think that open carry would be something that we couldn't do, and that if anything would be allowed, it would be concealed carry. It's just the opposite. In fact, it's constitutional to openly carry. And for many of our committee meetings up at the Capitol, we have individuals coming when we're talking about changes to gun bills. They come in openly carrying, and there's no problem with that. It's not against the law. You can carry openly a gun into the Capitol when the Capitol's open. In these COVID days, it's a little different, but so I do think that we ought to do a better job of making sure that when people conceal carry, they should be doing it after having been trained. They should be certified and have a background check to show that they are not on that excluded list, because there's an element of deceptiveness when you are coming into a situation and you're concealing a weapon that you have. If people are openly carrying, oftentimes they're a lot more careful about what they say. They're a lot more careful about what they do to not antagonize or aggravate someone to the point that they could get angry and use that gun. But if you're concealing and carrying, people don't know that you're in a position to do them some harm potentially.
Now, there are already gun laws on the books that amplify criminal acts. So robbing a bank carries a charge, and if the assailant had a concealed weapon, that charge is added. So why not just allow to conceal carry, knowing that if someone commits a crime, there will already be prosecution further?
Well, it makes sense at some level that that's a very rational way of looking at it. But the reality is that people oftentimes, when they're thinking about committing a crime with a gun, they're not thinking logically at all. And so what we want to do is create some barriers when you have concealed carry like this, or at the very least, again, we want to create an atmosphere where there is training involved and where there is a more formal, thorough process for ensuring that people who have a concealed carry weapon have gone through and been evaluated and identified as to whether or not they're on the restricted list or not.
Are there any concerns about how this law will affect any events like the riot that happened at the U.S. Capitol this month?
I don't know. You know, it's an interesting thing because there are some people that think that we're moving more toward violence in terms of the level of animosity or the level of passion that exists in our discussions, the levels of civility when we're talking about things that are deeply felt, like political topics, are going down, not up. I hope that we can reverse that trend to the extent it exists at all. I hope that we can be civil in dealing with each other. So I'm not sure that the kind of passions that we've seen the last few years increasing about political matters are going to be things that necessarily tie into increased violence levels. But I do think that we ought to make sure that we train people, and that we ought to make sure that those that everyone would agree shouldn't have access to guns, people who've been convicted of violent crimes or domestic violence offenses, don't have access to them.
Representative King, about 30 seconds left. This bill passed the House. What are your thoughts about where this legislation could go?
Well, it's going over to the Senate now. We'll have a committee hearing in front of the Senate. We'll have a vote among the senators, and then it'll go to Governor Cox to have him either sign or veto the bill. Let your senators know. It may come back to the House if it's amended. Let your legislators know how you feel, and let Governor Cox know how you feel about this. I think most people in Utah think it's a bad idea. They need to raise their voices.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is not the first time, I think Representative Brooks mentioned this, but it's not the first time that a bill like this has made its way through the legislation, is that right?
Right. Several years ago, I think it was 2013 or so, the same kind of bill passed, and Governor Herbert vetoed the bill, and there were not enough yes votes in the legislature to override his veto. But it's a controversial bill. Since that time, a number of other states have gone ahead and revoked their concealed carry permit laws, just as Representative Brooks is trying to do here, so we'll see what happens.
All right, you've been hearing from Representative Brian King. Representative, we really appreciate you taking part in this discussion. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you.